Samuel Reed moved slowly through the quiet house, a cardboard box in his hands. The afternoon light slipped in through thin curtains and drew pale lines on the old wooden floor. Dust floated in the air, soft and slow, like tiny memories that refused to settle. He had lived here for almost 30 years. Now the place felt like a museum, and he was its only visitor. The rooms were half empty, yet every corner still held a shadow of his life. He set the box down on the dining table and sighed. His knees ached. His back protested. The doctor called it age and normal, but Samuel knew it was more than that. It was the weight of all the things he had carried inside and never said out loud. He opened the drawer in the side cabinet. Inside were folded tablecloths, old receipts, rubber bands, and pens that no longer worked. He took them out one by one and sorted them into small piles. Trash. Maybe keep. Definitely trash, he muttered to himself. His voice sounded strange in the empty room. He had grown used to silence. No wife, no children, just the TV in the evening and the hum of the refrigerator at night. His fingers touched something rough, a corner of paper, wedged deep at the back of the drawer. He paused, then reached farther inside. The wood scraped his knuckles, but he ignored it. He pulled out a small, yellowed envelope. It was thin, worn at the edges, and slightly curled. There was a faint scent of old paper and perfume, almost gone. On the front, in soft, looping handwriting, was his name. Sam. Just that. No last name, no address, only the way she had always written it. For a moment, he stopped breathing. His heart, which had grown used to a slow, steady rhythm, stumbled. The room seemed to tilt very slightly. He knew that handwriting. He would have known it in the dark, with his eyes closed. Evelyn. He whispered her name in his head, not daring to say it aloud. It felt dangerous, like calling up a ghost. His thumb brushed over the ink. Time had faded it to a soft gray, but the curves were still graceful, gentle. He swallowed hard. How long has this been here? He asked the empty room. He tried to remember the last time he had opened this drawer. Not last year. Not the year before. Maybe 10 years? Maybe more. His chest tightened. He looked at the envelope as if it might vanish if he blinked. Old feelings rose inside him like a tide he could not control. Warmth, fear, shame, longing. He slid his finger under the flap and opened it carefully. The paper inside was folded in 3. He pulled it out and unfolded it with care, as if it might tear from his touch. The letter was short. Her words rose from the page, simple and clear. Sam, I don't want to end things like this. I hope you'll call me when you're ready. Here is my number. Please, just call. Even if it's only once. Evelyn. At the bottom of the page, a phone number was written. 10 digits that had once been a bridge between them. 10 digits he had never dialed. His eyes stung. He blinked, but the letters blurred. His hand began to tremble, the paper shaking in his grasp. He remembered the night she had given him that number. They had stood under a street lamp after an argument that had gone too far. She had pressed the folded paper into his hand. You don't have to decide now, she had said, her voice unsteady. Just call me when you're ready to talk. He had nodded, angry and confused, his pride louder than his heart. I just need time, he had replied. He had walked away, the paper in his pocket, his mind filled with stubborn thoughts. He had told himself he would call in a day or two, after things calmed down, after he felt less wounded, after he could speak without raising his voice. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, then years. He had never called. Now, in this silent dining room, with a box half filled with old receipts and broken pens, the weight of that choice pressed down on him with cruel force. He sank into the nearest. Samuel sat at the table long after the light outside had begun to fade. The cardboard box waited beside him, still open, still half empty. The letter in the metal box across the room felt louder than any sound. He rubbed his temples with his fingers, tired, not just in his body, but in a deeper place he didn't know how to name. For a while, he simply stared at the blank sheet of paper, where he had written Evelyn's name. The letters looked strange after all these years, familiar and foreign at the same time. His mind drifted backward, pulled toward the years between then and now. 30 years was a long time, long enough to build a life, long enough to waste one. He closed his eyes and let the past rise. He remembered his wedding day. The church was small, with white walls and wooden pews. Friends and family had filled the space with polite smiles and soft whispers. His bride, Laura, had walked down the aisle in a simple dress and a nervous smile. She was kind. She was steady. She had loved him in a quiet, patient way. Samuel had stood at the front, wearing a rented suit that pinched at the shoulders. He had smiled for the photos. He had spoken the vows. He had kissed the bride when the pastor told him to. But somewhere deep inside, a small part of him had stayed silent, not out of cruelty, not out of dislike, just because that part did not belong to this moment. That part had already been given away, to a woman with dark eyes and a soft voice who had once said, "Call me when you're ready." In the years that followed, he had tried to be a good husband. He went to work, he came home on time, he carried groceries, fixed small things around the house, paid bills. He and Laura laughed sometimes. They watched movies on the couch. They argued about little things, then made peace. But there were quiet evenings when she would look at him, across the table, and ask, "Are you okay, Sam? You seem far away today." He would force a small smile. "I'm fine, just tired from work." It was not a complete lie. Work was tiring. But something else drained him, something he did not dare name. At night, when Laura slept beside him, he would lie awake and stare at the ceiling. The glow from the street light outside painted faint shapes on the plaster. In that soft light, memories of Evelyn came and went like slow clouds. Her laughter, the way she would tilt her head when she listened, the argument that had cut them apart, the paper in his pocket with her number on it. He had kept that paper in his wallet for a long time. At first, he told himself he just needed more time. "I'll call when things are calmer," he thought. "I'll call when I feel ready. I don't want to sound desperate." Weeks passed, then months. One day he opened his wallet to pay for something, and saw the folded slip of paper. By then, he was already engaged to Laura. The sight of the number made his chest hurt. He stood outside the store that day, his heart beating too fast. He could have called from the payphone on the corner. He could have said, "Evelyn, I just needed time. Can we talk?" Instead, he had stared at the phone, then back at the paper. That part of his voice shook slightly, but he did not pull back this time. The fear was still there. So was the shame. But something else had joined them. A quiet, stubborn determination. He set the pen down. His hands rested on the table, palms open, as if letting go of something invisible. For 30 years, he had tried to live with his regret by pretending. It was too late. Tonight, with the letter found and the past standing clearly before him, that excuse no longer felt safe. It was not too late to ask. Not too late to look. Not too late to seek an answer, even if the answer hurt. Outside, night had fully fallen. The house was wrapped in darkness, but inside, Samuel's mind was awake. He picked up his cell phone one more time. He did not dial the number yet. Instead, he opened the browser and typed Evelyn's name. The screen glowed on his lined face. He sat very still as the search results loaded. Whatever he found, he knew one thing for certain. He would not go back to pretending she was just a memory. She had been real. Their love had been real. His silence had been real. Now, finally, his decision to do something would be real too. Samuel woke before sunrise the next morning. He had not slept well. His mind had been too busy, turning through memories and questions like pages in a worn book. When he finally rose from the bed, the sky outside was a deep gray blue, soft and quiet, the kind of light that made the world feel gentle and far away. He stood by the window and watched the early light spread across the street. The stillness reminded him of childhood mornings when everything felt possible, before the day grew loud. Today felt like one of those mornings. Though he was no longer a boy and possibilities no longer came easily, he made himself a simple breakfast toast, eggs, and a cup of tea. He barely tasted any of it. His thoughts kept circling the same question. Where is Evelyn now? After cleaning the kitchen, he walked to the small desk, near the living room window. The notepad from the night before lay open. Her name was still written at the top of the page, sharp and clear in the morning light. He sat down, straightened his back, and took a deep breath. He typed her name into the search bar again. He added the city where she had lived. He added the company she once worked for. He even tried adding alumni and volunteer group, because she had once helped at a community center. Dozens of results appeared. Most were unrelated. Some were too recent. Others were about people with similar names: artists, teachers, retirees, even an author. He clicked each link carefully, afraid to skip anything important. His eyes moved slowly over the pages, steady and patient, even though his heart beat faster with each search. He had waited 30 years. He could search for a few more minutes, but nothing pointed directly to his Evelyn. He leaned back and rubbed his chin. His fingers brushed over coarse stubble. He had forgotten to shave. His reflection in the darkened laptop screen looked older than usual. Still, there was something new in his face, something alert, awake. Samuel pushed the chair back and stood. He walked to the bookshelf and pulled out an old photo album. From his younger years, most of the pictures were faded. Old friends, family gatherings, work events. At the very back, tucked between two pages, he found a small, curled photograph of himself and Evelyn standing by the river. Her hand rested lightly on his arm. He was smiling in the picture, a real smile, not the polite ones he wore in most photos. Seeing that expression on his younger self unsettled him. He touched the edge of the photograph. Then he noticed something he had forgotten. A faint handwritten note on the back. Her address at the time. His breath caught. It was more than he had before. It was a place to start. He set the album aside and pulled out his car keys. His hands trembled slightly, not from age this time, but from urgency, from the sudden feeling that he needed to move now. Samuel arrived at the coastal retirement community just after noon. The sun lay gently over the quiet buildings, turning the pale walls warm and soft. Tall trees swayed slowly in the wind, their shadows stretching across the walkways like long, calm fingers. The air smelled faintly of ocean salt, mixed with the scent of trimmed grass and blooming flowers. It was peaceful in a way that made his heart both relax and tighten at the same time. He parked his car near the entrance and stepped out. For a moment, he stood still, letting the breeze brush against his face. His stomach felt heavy, knotted with nerves he had not felt in years. He didn't know what he would hear today, but he knew that whatever waited inside would change something in him forever. He approached the main office. A young receptionist sat behind the counter, typing on a keyboard with soft clicks. Her bright smile contrasted sharply with the weight Samuel carried. "Hello, sir," she said kindly. "How can I help you today?" Samuel cleared his throat. "I'm looking for someone. A resident here. Her name is Margaret Lewis." She glanced at him, then at her computer. After a moment, she nodded. "Yes, Margaret is here. She volunteers at our small library down the hall. You're welcome to visit her." "Thank you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. He walked down the hallway slowly, each step measured and cautious. The walls were decorated with paintings, landscapes of beaches, gardens, soft sunsets. People moved gently through the halls, some with walkers, some with canes, all with the slow grace of age. Samuel reached the library door. It was open just a little. Inside, he heard the soft rustle of pages turning. He paused. His hand hovered near the doorframe. He felt suddenly unsure, like he was about to step into a moment he could never walk back from. Then he knocked lightly. The sound was small but seemed to echo in the quiet room. "Come in," a woman's voice called. He pushed the door open. Inside, the room was bright and lined with bookshelves. A woman in her early 60s sat at a small table, sorting returned books into neat stacks. Her hair was silver gray and tied back loosely. Her glasses rested low on her nose as she read the labels on each book. She looked calm, focused, entirely at ease. Samuel stepped inside. She looked up. Their eyes met. For a brief moment, there was no recognition. Then her gaze sharpened. She studied him, his face, his posture, the lines of age across his features. "You're Samuel Reed," she said quietly. He froze. The fact that she knew him without introduction felt like a sudden gust of cold wind. "Yes," he answered. "I'm Samuel." Margaret slowly closed the book in her hands. She set it aside with care. There was something in her eyes, not anger, not joy, but a deep, tired understanding. "Sit down," she said softly, pointing to the chair. Samuel walked out of the retirement community with slow, unsteady steps. The sunlight felt different now, brighter, sharper, almost intrusive. He held the envelope tightly in his hand, as though it might blow away if he loosened his grip. His breath came uneven, rising and falling like a man climbing a steep hill. He reached his car but didn't open the door. Instead, he leaned both hands against the roof and bowed his head. The breeze stirred his hair, carrying traces of salt from the ocean nearby. But even that gentle wind felt heavy on his shoulders. After several long moments, he opened the car door and sat inside. The seat creaked softly under him. He closed the door, shutting out the world, and rested the envelope on his lap. His eyes stayed on his name, Sam, written in Evelyn's handwriting. A name spoken long ago, now rising again to pull him back across the years. He swallowed and touched the edge of the envelope. His fingers trembled slightly. He felt like a man holding something fragile and ancient, something sacred. Finally, with a deep, uneven breath, he opened it. Inside was a single folded letter. The paper was thin, worn in some places, and soft at the edges. He unfolded it slowly, carefully flattening the creases with his fingertips. Evelyn's handwriting filled the page. Even after 30 years, it was as graceful as he remembered, curved, elegant, gentle. For a moment, he almost couldn't bring himself to read it. He feared what the words might say, or what they might not. Then he began. Sam, if you are reading this, then I must believe that you finally came looking for me. I used to imagine what that moment would feel like, whether it would bring me peace or pain. But I think, more than anything, it brings me comfort. I want to tell you something I never said clearly enough. I cared for you deeply, more deeply than you probably ever knew. When things ended between us, it wasn't because the feelings disappeared. It was because we were young and afraid, and neither of us knew how to reach across the hurt. Samuel blinked quickly. His vision blurred, and he pressed the back of his hand to his eyes. Her voice rose inside him, gentle and familiar, weaving itself into the spaces of the quiet car. He continued reading. I waited for your call, longer than I should have, longer than I admitted to anyone, even to myself sometimes. Every day, I hoped to hear your voice, even if it was only to say goodbye properly. But the call didn't come, and life, it kept moving, as it always does. I tried to build something new. Samuel reached home just as the sky darkened into a deep blue. Streetlights flickered on one by one, casting long, gentle shadows across the neighborhood. He parked the car in the driveway but did not get out immediately. His hands rested on the steering wheel, still and tense, as if letting go would make the world shift again. Evelyn's letter lay tucked safely inside the glove compartment. He could feel its presence even without touching it, like a quiet heartbeat. Beside him, steady and patient, her words had settled deep within him, comforting and piercing at the same time. After several minutes, he finally pushed the car door open. The evening air was cool, almost cold. He walked toward the house slowly, feeling each step as though he carried something heavier than grief alone, something closer to truth. Inside, the house was dim. He turned on a single lamp in the living room. The soft yellow light pooled over the furniture, familiar, but distant, as if he were seeing his home from the outside for the first time. He sat down at the edge of his sofa. For a long moment, he stared at his hands that had held the letter, hands that had let 30 years pass without dialing a single number. They looked older now, lined and worn, but something inside them felt awake again, trembling with a kind of restless purpose. After a few minutes, he rose. He walked to the hallway closet, the one he rarely opened anymore, and pulled the door wide. Dust swirled in the slanted light like tiny drifting stars. Boxes lined the shelves, stacked neatly but untouched for years. He reached for one near the top, a small brown box with tape peeling at the edges. He remembered it vaguely, old keepsakes from his 20s, things he had tucked away long ago. His fingers brushed off the dust. He carried the box to the living room and set it on the coffee table. With slow, careful hands, he lifted the lid. Inside were fragments of a younger life, photographs, movie ticket stubs, a watch with a cracked strap, and a small cassette tape recorder. The recorder was black and scuffed, its buttons worn. He hadn't seen it in decades. For a moment, he simply stared at it. He remembered Evelyn giving it to him one year for his birthday. She had smiled as she handed it to him and said, "You can record ideas or notes for your stories, or leave me messages." The memory landed gently but painfully. He reached into the box and lifted the recorder. It felt surprisingly heavy in his palm. He turned it over and saw that a cassette tape was already inside. A small, faded sticker on the tape read E. His breath caught. His body went still. The world around him seemed to quiet, as if holding its breath too. He pressed the power button. A soft click. Nothing. He pressed it again. Still nothing. He opened the battery compartment. The batteries had corroded long ago. He went to the kitchen drawer, found a fresh set, and replaced them carefully. When he pressed the button this time, a soft whirring sound filled the silence of the room. The recorder was alive again. He hesitated. His thumb hovered over the play button. He was afraid, terrified, even. This tape had been waiting inside the recorder for 30 years. What was on it? Why had Evelyn recorded something? Did she expect him to? Samuel woke before dawn, long before the first streaks of morning touched the sky. He lay in bed for a moment, staring at the ceiling, breathing slowly. Sleep had come in short, restless pieces, scattered between memories of Evelyn's voice and the ache of what he had heard the night before. But beneath the sorrow, something new lingered. A sense of direction, a quiet resolve, a purpose stronger than fear. He sat up, rubbed his tired eyes, and swung his legs over the side of the bed. His knees protested as he stood, but he steadied himself with a hand on the nightstand. He whispered softly into the dim room. Today. The word felt heavy and honest. This was the day he would stop running from the past. He dressed slowly, a clean shirt, pressed pants, his older coat, clothes that made him feel respectful, worthy, in some small way, of the journey he was about to take. He made himself a cup of coffee, though he barely drank half of it. His stomach was tight, knotted with nerves and a strange hope he hadn't felt in years. By the time he stepped outside, the morning air was cool and quiet. Birds had begun to chirp softly in the trees, their voices carrying a gentle rhythm. The sky was still pale, the sun only beginning to rise. He got into his car, gripping the steering wheel a moment before turning the key. He felt like a man bracing himself before a storm, not one of wind and rain, but of memories and truths long buried. The drive to Claire Hart's address took almost an hour. The roads were mostly empty, the town small and quiet. He passed by fields washed with early sunlight, their grasses swaying gently in the morning breeze. He tried to steady his breathing, but his chest tightened each time he thought of what he might hear. Finally, he reached the neighborhood. Claire's house was small, single-story, with pale shutters, and a narrow front porch lined with potted plants. It looked peaceful, simple, warm, the kind of place where laughter and quiet sadness could both exist comfortably. Samuel parked by the curb. He sat still for a minute, both hands gripping the steering wheel. His heart thudded slowly but heavily, each beat echoing in his chest. He whispered to himself, "You can do this." Then he opened the door. As he walked up the path, he noticed an old wind chime hanging near the door. It swayed gently in the breeze, producing a soft, delicate sound. Something about it made him think of Evelyn. A faint, familiar music, fragile and full of longing. He lifted his hand to knock. But before he could touch the door, it opened. A woman in her mid-50s stood there. She had Evelyn's eyes. Gentle, dark, thoughtful. Eyes that studied him with a mixture of curiosity and something else. Recognition. "Are you Samuel?" she asked quietly. He swallowed hard. "Yes," he said. "I am Samuel Reed." She exhaled softly, as if she had been expecting this moment for a long time. "I'm Claire." They stood there for several seconds, simply looking at each other. Samuel didn't know what to say first. Every word he rehearsed on the drive here felt small now, too. Small for what this meeting meant. Claire stepped aside. "Come in," she said gently. "You've come a long way." He entered slowly. The house smelled faintly of lavender and old books. The living room was cozy, softly lit by morning sun drifting through sheer curtains. There were pictures on the walls, family gatherings, anniversaries, small moments. Samuel drove home under a quiet afternoon sky. The sun hung low, soft and golden, casting long lines of light across the road. He did not turn on the radio. He needed the silence. He needed to let the morning settle inside him. Every word Claire had said, every truth he had finally spoken aloud. When he reached his house, he turned off the engine but did not get out right away. He sat there in the stillness, hands resting loosely on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. His body felt tired, but not the heavy, lonely kind of tired he'd lived with for years. This was different. This was the tiredness that followed a long walk towards something honest. Eventually, he stepped out of the car. The air cooled as the sun dipped lower. A soft breeze brushed the back of his neck as he walked to the front door. Inside, the house felt unchanged, but he was not the same man who had left it that morning. He entered the living room and sat on the edge of the sofa. For a long moment, he simply looked at the objects on the coffee table. The old cassette recorder, the tape marked with an E, and Evelyn's letter, set neatly beside it. He reached out and touched the recorder gently. The small device was silent now, but the memory of her voice echoed clearly in his mind. "Please don't let too much time pass." Samuel swallowed hard. He felt something rising in his chest, a pull, gentle but insistent. He knew what it was. He had known since the moment Claire handed him the note. There was still one thing left to do, something he should have done 30 years earlier, something he had always been afraid to face. He stood slowly and walked to the small table where his cell phone rested. The modern screen glowed softly as he picked it up. It felt cold in his hand, but familiar, far more familiar than the old phones of his youth. He took a deep breath. Then he sat down again, the phone cradled between both palms. Claire had given him a new number, a number that would not bring Evelyn back, but would carry his voice to someone who still carried her memory. His fingers hovered over the keypad, numbers blurred slightly as his eyes stung. He blinked, breathed, and began to dial. Each digit felt like a step down a long path, a path he should have walked decades ago. When he finished dialing, he did not press the call button right away. He held the phone against his chest and closed his eyes. His voice trembled as he whispered, "Evelyn, this is the call I should have made. I'm sorry it's so late." Then, with a breath that shook but did not falter, he pressed call. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. With each ring, his heart pounded harder. He almost lowered the phone, almost hung up, old fear tugging at him like a long shadow. Then someone answered. A soft voice, a woman's voice. "Hello?" It was Claire, gentler than earlier, as if she had been expecting him. Samuel's breath hitched. For a moment, he could not speak. Then he forced the words out, his voice low and unsteady. "It's me," he said. "It's Samuel." There was a long pause on the other end. Then Claire spoke, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm glad you called." Samuel closed his eyes. His throat tightened. The silence between them felt warm, full, unmistakably alive. "I wanted to say," he began, but his voice cracked. He tried again. "I wanted to say the things I never said. The things I should have said to her." Claire waited, not rushing him,